Hello, and welcome to another episode of Sim Sundays. Now, Chris, his son, has a little accident with the old wrist, doing some sports, some soccer in the US. So he is not joining us this week. So I'm driving solo, which is a little bit nervous. But luckily, we've got Mike in the background doing all the broadcasting. So I'm in safe hands, and I'm joined by somebody who knows how to talk. It is Chris Buxton, sim racing and real world motorsport commentator. Welcome to the show, Chris.
I am honoured to be here. I've been really enjoying seeing how this series has grown in its very, very short lifetime. You've had some amazing people on the show so far. You've had a real life racing driver, you've had programmers for Assetto Corsa, and you invited me. I am a mere pleb compared to the people you've had on. And compared to you wonderful people at Gridfinder, I am honoured nonetheless.
You are too kind. It always freaks me out when people say that they've watched or listened to the podcast, because in my head, we're just doing this for just a bit of fun, and it's a podcast, a bit of a side project. We're doing it because we love it. And then somebody says, "Oh, I like the podcast." Like, hang on, what? You listen? Oh, God. So that's always nice to hear. And yeah, we have had some absolutely cracking guests. We've been very fortunate. The sim racing community and the motorsport community, as you know, and we'll get into this, I'd like to talk about what it's like being part of the paddock and then also being part of the virtual paddock that you've more recently become a part of. But the motorsport community and the sim racing community is incredibly friendly, incredibly warm, incredibly generous. So when we've been reaching out to guests, literally everyone's been like, yeah, it sounds like a nice idea. Nobody's asked us, well, how many thousands of listens are you getting? Because we're like, 0.00. Like, I don't know. We're doing it because it's fun if you want to join us. So yeah, it has been a cool journey. I think this is maybe episode 10 or 11, perhaps. Anyway, less about Gridfinder, more about you. Chris, tell us your story. Now, I'm not going to leave the question there because that'd be incredibly unkind. For the first question in a 40-minute podcast, tell us the story of you, Chris. But I'd like to learn a little bit about the early days. And I kind of do this with a lot of guests because I'm always intrigued how somebody gets into the world of sim racing, right? Because it's so niche. There's not many of us around there relative to other esports or other hobbies. So I'm always interested to see how people went from what they did previously to getting into sim racing. Now, you've got a bit of a journey through motorsport, which is going to be quite exciting to hear about. So how did you first start your journey in motorsport generally?
Like most people, I am a big fan of motor racing. Formula One was where I first got the bug for motor racing. We're talking... I'm quite an old bear. I was born in 1858 while coal was a major power source. No, I was, I'm born in 1980, so I'm 42 now. So I tend to be the elder statesman in the sim racing world. And I've been used to that ever since I entered it 6 years ago. But my fondness for motor racing started with Formula One back in the kind of Senna Prost era. And from there, I've just loved anything that could race. If it has an engine and can move, I'm interested in it. Whilst Formula One was my main area of focus, as the years went on, and particularly as my brother had started to buy older cars, like Mark II Escorts was his first car, so I then started to get a bit of a appreciation for classic machinery. But how I got into sim racing particularly, because I was a fan of motorsport, I would play games like Jeff Cramman's Grand Prix, was kind of the first racing game rather than a arcade-based, Mario Kart.
Right. Yeah,
sort of thing. But I would try most things with that had a form of racing in it. And I think Chris, who as I say, it's a shame he isn't here, because I think in one of the previous episodes, I'm sure it was Chris that said that something he likes to do is a lot of time trialing.
Yes.
And I'm guilty of exactly the same thing. So how I started into sim racing links back to that, because I was a huge fan of Project Cars 1 and 2. Let's not talk about 3.
No. Project Cars 2 has a bit of a cult following, right? It was
even still.
Even now, it's kind of got that sort of Assetto Corsa stamp on it that this will live forever. The community will keep this going.
Yeah, but Assetto Corsa continues to evolve through its modern community and is still well supported by Kunos, whereas, of course, PCAS 2 never had that. So it could never stand on the same stage as AC. But I was just beginning to dabble with becoming a YouTuber. So I was starting to learn how to make videos. And I started my very first YouTube video I ever made were vehicle showcases for Project Cars 1. And from there, I started to poke around on the Slightly Mad Studio forums. And it was in those forums I saw an advert for a racing league that was about to launch. And I'd been umming and ahhing about commentary for a while, but never really examined about how to get into it. You know, the closest I got was my own radio show on the local radio station in the town I live in, which happens to be where Jensen Button is from.
Right.
I mean, I may as well say it's Froome in Somerset. Where, you know, people will Google that one pretty quickly. He actually came to turn our Christmas lights on a number of years back. I think 7-8 years ago, and I got to interview him because I was the Formula One expert of the radio station, and he was a very, very nice man.
That's very cool.
So
that's a big gig to get in your early days as a commentator,
yeah.
right?
Well, that predates commentary, and it was May 2016 when I spotted this particular post for a community, Apex Online Racing, which are still around, and it was for a Formula Renault League in Project Cars 1, and that was like, I could commentate on virtual racing. Yeah, okay, let's give this a try. So I emailed them and said, you know, this is me. I've never done it before. You know, here's a link to my radio show. And I gave it a try, and I was just hooked. I still remember I still have somewhere on my YouTube channel that first commentary. I cannot listen to it. It's, for me, it's, and I'm sure everybody is like this when you've done an art for a number of years and you go back to where you start. You oh God, it's I can't listen to it. It's horrendous for me. Other people may well enjoy it, and that's fair enough. And I was greeted.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because you didn't come from like a completely inexperienced background. You had a radio show, right? So it was commentary for the first time, but it wasn't broadcasting for the first time. And actually, you dabbled in YouTube as well, right? So how was the first commentary gig you did? How did it feel different to the other things that you'd done?
Well, everything else was always pre-planned. You know, the radio show was always a post-event script, essentially. So I was reporting on events that already happened, and of course, the YouTube stuff, you edit it to. Although I never actually, with the very first videos, I did edit them, but then I started making series, actual sim racing series, and they were just recorded and uploaded. I never, as I wanted it kind of raw. I wanted that warts and all kind of feel for that series. Yeah. And I carried that on for several years. So the commentary was live, and that was a very, very different discipline that I wasn't used to. I'd never been in that situation before. I'd interviewed people, yes, which is obviously a live situation, but that was a rarity. And suddenly I'm put in a position where your entire focus has to be on lots of different things. In an interview, you have a set amount of questions, or you have a schedule to follow, and you react to responses from your interviewee. But your focus is only on one place. It's on your
write all this down.
Yeah.
Let's make some notes here.
Whereas commentary, you're focusing on the action you can see. You're focusing on the tower to see if there's position changes. I was totally naive. I thought, let's give it a go, see what happens. I was knackered after the first one. I was exhausted. I remember I sort of sat there like that for about 10 minutes. I thought, I need to go to bed. It was like 8:30 in the evening, and I was exhausted. But I was hooked. I was, for the first time, I thought, again, like a lot of people, I kind of, my working career was never anything exciting. It was customer service based. So I'd had a number of years of what I call vocal presentation. I knew how to talk to people. So that's where I had a bit of an advantage to commentators that have gone straight into commentary from a very young age, that haven't had that life experience behind them that I have. So I knew how to talk, which sounds like a bit of a strange statement. Everybody talks. but not everybody has that kind of vocal presentation skill, that interpersonal skill that enables them to be a good commentator. And I started to realize I had that skill, but I found that was my direction. I suddenly had a focus. But I'm a family man. I have 2 children. I did then. So finding that work, commentary, family life balance was very difficult. And initially I did what a lot of very new commentators do. I was like, yes, I'll commentate on everything. And one, I burnt out really quickly. And that's not a nice feeling. But of course, it was creating difficulties at home because I was using a lot of time away from my children who were very young. They're 12 and 8 now, but of course, 6 years ago they were 6 and 2. So, and my children are special needs children, so it's not like I can just leave them to play in the corner. These days, more I can because they're older, but back then I absolutely couldn't do. So it was a difficult balance to strike, but I've been very fortunate in my commentary career that my commentaries have very, very largely been well received. So I knew that not only did I enjoy doing it, but I actually had a talent for it. I'm not someone that's very good at doing the whole "look at me, I'm wonderful." I can't do that. That's just hard. That's why my social media presence is minimal, because I'm not very good at, hey, I'm doing this, come along.
That whole self-branding, kind of building up your own profile and treating yourself as a brand that you've got to get out there to all these different organizations. But I mean, you started with AOR. I mean, that's not,
I did.
Sim racing since then has become huge, and now there's thousands of these communities. So, a lot of commentators will start with a community with, say, 30 or 40 drivers, and not very many people, if any, watching those races in order to kind of cut their teeth and create their show reel. You kind of went straight in with AOR, which I suppose, A, because you had that experience and that talent, but B, because it was, in some senses, perhaps the right place at the right time. Sim racing was just taking off, and commentary was becoming like a thing that people needed, right?
Yeah, it was very much in its ascendancy at that point. I started in the Project Cars arena, and then I was asked at some point along the road to do their Formula One side, which was their big ticket item. That was what made AOR was the place to be for F1 drivers wanting to compete with the best. Very much WOR and PSTL more have that title now, but back then it was down to AOR.
Yeah.
And I, for a period of time, was their head commentator. So it was my responsibility to give commentary positions to commentators, which was very stressful. And that was very, very challenging, because it was great telling people, yes, you've got the top tier on the PlayStation side. Well, that was great. But having to tell commentators, no, I'm afraid you're in F3 again, is difficult, because you can't replace those at the top if they haven't done anything wrong. But that makes it nearly impossible for those on the lower ladders to get towards those at the top where they realistically want to be. So that was tough. That was a difficult position, but I did it. And I've had some amazing opportunities resulting from the reputation I built up at the time with AOR. When that started to kind of get a bit rocky for AOR, I was then focusing on the real world commentary side. So I kind of took a step back from sim racing for a period of time, almost at the wrong time, because when I decided to come back to sim racing, I wasn't the hot ticket item anymore. So, which is that's the natural evolution of things. So that was a bit, I'll be honest, that was a bit of a bitter pill to swallow. There was an element. Well, there was an element of me that was because I was very used to dealing with the very best in the forms of the drivers I was talking about. There was an element of me that expected to get straight into that position again. Almost, I hate to use the phrase, but it was true. There was a sense of entitlement. Do you know who I am? Do you know what I've done? I didn't go that far, but there was that element. And then because I couldn't go into those positions because there was somebody already there, and I was, they'd done nothing wrong to be replaced. Same as the situation I had when I was at the head commentator at AOR. It was a case of I had to then reevaluate realistically where I sat in the pecking order. So it was like, yeah, okay, I've got to rebuild my reputation, because you very quickly are superseded if you disappear from the scene. Now, that's the same for drivers at a top level as well, of any discipline. If you disappear for a season or even half a season, you're very, very quickly replaced. So,
the mob is fickle.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. No one is indestructible in this industry or the real world.
So tell us about those early days then, when you were still cutting your teeth and you were still doing your first few races and you were learning. What were you finding? What were the challenges? And I'm talking commentary specific. So anyone listening who wants to be a commentator, they might be wondering like, what's going to be the hardest part about this, or what's going to be the most rewarding part? In those early days, what was it?
The challenge for me was remembering everything I had to remember. The more you do something, the more automatic it becomes. So you remember instances that you've seen before. You more remember corner names. Even now, I don't commentate without a track map, because I've got a terrible memory at the best of times.
Well, that's kind of reassuring. And the reason I say that is because it hasn't gone live yet, because it's an audio-only version. But I actually interviewed Alex Goldschmidt last week about commentary generally, and he was telling us about his systems. So his systems to kind of get all this information and get the stats and all the driver profiles and their stats per track, per series, per chassis, even for go-karts. And he was reeling off lots of this technical data during the interview, even with no notes. I thought, is it really the case actually that you have to have an incredibly good memory for detail in order to be a successful commentator? And that's kind of what I was leaning towards during that interview, but it sounds like maybe there are methods around that.
You either have to have a very good memory or have very good notes. Like, when I'm in the real world side of things, I have as many notes as I can do, because the real world stuff I've done is classic cars. I haven't grown up with those classic cars being the norm. We're talking 60s and 70s cars that predate even me. So I don't know the intricacies of an MGB or Triumph TR4. Whereas I'm much more familiar with a Volkswagen Golf, or Sierra Cosworth, things like that. They're more familiar to me. But so I make up for the lack of experience with information. So as many details as I can find on drivers, previous results, and things like that. So I don't have to rely on because my memory is awful. So I have a lot of notes. Even if I don't end up using it, 85, 90% of them, I feel more comfortable doing what I do when I have that backup behind me.
Yeah.
I'm more nervous if I don't have that preparation there, and it shows in the performance I give.
But there's a balance, right, with commentary, and this is only from the perspective of an observer. That you have, there's kind of a balance to be struck between being very data rich in what you're delivering and remembering to tell the story of what's actually happening on the screen, right? So most of the data that you'll have prepped, the very nature of it being prepped means it's happened in the past. And so if you're talking about it, you can't be talking about what's happening on the screen at the time. So that you must have to make decisions all the time about like, right, am I going to talk about this battle happening here, or is it a bit of a lull and I'm going to talk about the guy out front, and this is his first time out front in how many races, or you must be constantly trying to make these decisions.
That becomes instinctive with experience. But yes, early on, you will make the mistake of burning up what information you've got and suddenly finding yourself with nothing to talk about.
Right, yeah.
Every new commentator will do that. Experienced commentators will do it. One of the most difficult commentaries I've ever done was in I think it was 2018 or must have been 2019 Challenger Series for Formula One, where there was no race. There was 45 minutes of filling in, and no race actually happened. And that was because it was Xbox Live were just having an absolute horrendous day. Every time we went to launch the lobby, it failed. So me and my counterpart, Justin Sutton, who I love working with Justin, because we'd both been in the industry a while, we had an amount of things to talk about. But we both admitted if that had gone on any longer, we were out of stock.
You'd have dried up.
Yeah, we'd have ended up talking about what we had for breakfast that morning. We were out of out of that kind of mental stock of information you use to fill in with. But
I think some of my favourite commentators are the Radio 5 Live commentary for Formula One with Jenny Gow, Jolyon Palmer, and Jack Nicholls. And the reason it works is because they are telling a story, and that you can really tell that they're just enjoying the event together whilst they're talking about it. And I remember I was actually on holiday, so I can remember this so vividly. But I was on holiday, and I remember which Grand Prix it was. It would have been last year. It would have been about September, and there was a red flag. And the red flag went on for ages, and they would just went off on one, and they would start talking about each other's like favorite types of cheese based like from the region where they were. But it was so incredibly entertaining, and I remember listening just with this sense of awe that these are race commentators. People are here to hear the story of the race. There's no racing happening, and yet I am quite happy listening to these guys just talking utter nonsense for 45 minutes, and every now and then kind of dipping back into an update on what's happening kind of around the track. It's an incredible skill, especially overcoming that sense of stage fright, right? If you're booked to talk and you can't think of anything to say, then there must be a moment of panic. How do you overcome that?
Not easily. That's something, again, it sounds like a cop-out answer, but it's experience that takes you through those sort of things. And you will have them. Any new commentator, anyone new to any kind of presentation role, whether you're public speaking, commentating, whatever it is, you will have situations where you're stuck and your brain just goes, meh. Just gives you nothing to say. And you've still got however long of your broadcast or whatever it is you're doing. You still have a time to fill. And you've got all these eyes or virtual eyes staring at you, and everything feels like, ground, please. Everything just feels like it comes to an absolute halt. But it's experience that helps you get the tools to deal with that element of nervousness, as well as, like I said earlier, of having a collection of things to use if you need to.
Right, so you almost have a kind of like a backup pool, like a reservoir of ideas and talking points that you can check off and just hope you don't get to the bitter end of that list.
Yeah, and you will for some situations. I had one where I was doing a 12-hour broadcast solo. That was the hardest one I've ever done, and I did run out of things to say. By about the seventh between hours 7 and 9 was really, really difficult. One, because I was starting to feel really tired. But two, I even said at one point, because sometimes you just have to admit defeat and say, I'm struggling to find things to say here. But that's where having somebody alongside, you mentioning about, Joni and Jenny and having all bouncing off of one another. The importance of having a good partner with you, even if the person you're with isn't necessarily the best commentator in the world, but if you work with them well, if you bounce off of them brilliantly well, that can make a whole world of difference, because one, you've got somebody else to actually give their input, which you then can respond to. But exactly as you would describe it, you end up with moments where you're just being jovial with one another.
Because you're there to entertain, right? You're there to entertain. Although the commentators, from a purist sense, might consider that we have a duty to tell the audience exactly what's happening in the race. Well, the whole idea of a race as a spectator sport is for people to be entertained. So if the commentator is just adding to that sense of entertainment, then that's surely good. And but maybe there's a bit of a balance if you're not really focusing on the kind of the motorsport element of it and you're going a little bit too off-piste.
Yes, there is a balance to be struck. Absolutely so. But I mean, it's a very old-fashioned value to only give information. Go back to the BBC of the 1920s. You can't be
right. Yeah.
How dare you have an accent if you're not proper? Stiff upper lip English. You can't talk to the BBC. That sort of thing. That is a very old-fashioned. Why, thank you. It's a very old-fashioned value, which, if that works for you, and there's another important element of commentary, is your own style. your own method of delivery. There's no point trying to be somebody else because you'll be called out for. If I tried to be Crofty, people would call me out for it. I can only be me. I can only deliver my commentary in my own style, which won't work for everybody. And that is another very, very difficult lesson very early on, is that not everybody will enjoy what you do. The more people that do, then you're doing it right. And I've had situations where I've had to kind of talk. I'll tell you, one particular example is Jessica Bell. She's a brilliant commentator. She is involved in hundreds of leagues now and is also commentator coordinator for several of them. But early on, she came to me at AOR. And she came up with, or still has this same kind of stick because she's female. Everyone assumes she's a 12-year-old boy, and it really did knock her confidence very early on. I mean, because she's always had to deal with it. She's gotten better and better, and she's got broader shoulders, so she's learned to deal with that. But early on, I actually had to sideline her at one point because she was getting so much flack that the higher ups were getting worried about then it becoming like a almost a commercial impact. So I was reluctant, but I had to do it. But also, I didn't want her to lose her confidence and love of doing it. You have to have an enthusiasm for public speaking. If you're dreading it, you'll never do it well.
Well, that brings me on to a point specifically about sim racing commentary, which is, I suppose, unlike real world motorsport commentary, and we'll get onto that and how you got into that in a second. But with sim racing, if you're brave enough, I suppose, to have the chat up whilst you're commentating, then you're going to receive instant feedback on your performance. That if you, I don't know, let's say you went to your local 750 Motor Club series and you were commentating the Clios or whatever, and you're up in your tower and you're just commentating, talking around, you're not likely to see feed. No one's going to come up to the commentary box and be like, I don't know what you're saying about that, or that was boring, or what are you on about? Like, it just doesn't happen, right? So you're just kind of broadcasting out into the air, and there's no real direct feedback. Whereas with sim racing, especially some of the bigger leagues, AOR, WR, PSGL, they can have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people in the chat. If you say something or you make a mistake, you're going to know about it straight away.
Yep. And very early on, I paid way too much attention to that. I'd be watching the how many people were live, how many people were watching count like a hawk, and that would really put me off. I only ever did that on my very first broadcast, and when it would dip, I would start to panic, thinking, "Did I do something wrong? What was it? Was it me?" And I thought, "Why am I doing that? Why the hell am I doing it?" Do not do it. It will do you no good to watch the how many are live. Have a look at it at the end to see how many people were there. If there were 3, fine. It doesn't matter. If you're doing something you love to do, that's the biggest part, because then you will deliver the best performance you can. If you're enjoying what you're doing, it's not a waste of time. People, you'll always have detractors. You'll always have haters. I've had them, fortunately for myself, very few times. But I've had people saying, "What the hell are you saying?" And sometimes that's made me, when I start to overthink that, and I'm very guilty of this, my performance suffers. If I see a negative comment in the chat, I overthink it. I do. I don't have a very thick skin. Better than I was at the beginning. But as soon as somebody would criticize what I was doing, either in the coverage or what I'd physically said, I would start to stutter. I would start to not panic as such, but I would just start to. My performance would suffer. So I don't pay attention to. I keep a vague eye on the chat to see if anyone's asked something. If I have an opportunity to answer it, what tires is such and such on, or what's the weather doing? Yes, or whatever, something like that. Then it gives me an opportunity to answer that.
So, what would you say is the biggest mistake you've ever made when commentating, real or virtual? What's the biggest faux pas?
Oh God, how long have you got? When it comes to
tell us the most exciting story.
There are numerous I could probably say. One of the things I think about when it comes to mistakes, and I made this decision very, very early on, is own them, run with them, mock yourself with them. Because the way I dealt with, rather than getting to the end of the broadcast of, oh my God, why did I say that? Why did I call this corner number this or whatever? Then I'm forever getting corner names wrong, driver names wrong, what have you. And I watch a broadcast back and I could write like an essay of all the mistakes I've made. Run with it. One, you can't do anything about it because it's live, and if it's edited, then that's a different matter. But generally, they're live. You can't do anything about it. Run with it. Yeah,
and this is why I'm convinced that the kind of the stats, the figures, the facts aren't the most important part of the commentary. The enthusiasm and the story is the most important bit. So, Murray Walker, very famous commentator. Everyone loved him. He had so much energy and passion, but arguably made a lot of mistakes, whilst he was commentating. Would get cars wrong, drivers wrong, corner numbers wrong, wouldn't know what tyres people were on. But it didn't really matter because you were listening along and you had a massive smile on your face because the guy was enjoying it so much.
100% agree. It's how you deliver it is so important, and it has to come with enthusiasm. You cannot do commentary half-assed. It's impossible. If you're not into it, the audience will know it because they're coming into turn one. Oh, what a great pass. No one wants to listen to that. I mean, okay, you can go completely the other way. It's like, oh my God, he started the race. You can go too far with it. So you do have to strike a balance. But again, when you're starting out, you don't know what your style is. You don't know whether you fit into the analytical side, the color commentator, or the play-by-play side, which is more where my style is. Not to say I can't do analytical side, but I'm much more suited to the verbal diarrhea that's needed when you do the play-by-play. And you have to have that energy. Even if you yourself are absolutely shattered and you can barely, keep your head off keep your head up like this, you still have to kind of dig deep and find that energy, which when the racing is good, I find that is very easy to do. When you've got an endurance field at Le Mans, there's only 8 cars remaining. That's hard. That's when you need experience. That's when you need your stock of facts behind you. So you do need those facts. You do need the filler bits. But vast majority, I'd say at least 75% of any commentary delivered should be on what you can immediately see, what's immediately going on. But it's also finding where the action is. If the leader has just disappeared off into the distance, leave them alone. They're not doing anything interesting. They're just going off and being 2 seconds a lap faster than everybody else. Have a look at the argument for 11th, 12th, 20th, 100th, whatever. If they're having a good battle, give them some airtime. I'm, again, very keen on trying to give airtime to everybody involved. This is more relevant to sim racing because in the real world, you don't have control over that. But I'm very keen on giving representation to everybody. Exactly as you said earlier, Tom. You are telling a story. I feel it's very important to represent the drivers in as best light as I can because they are putting hours into what they're doing. And depending on what you're talking about, some of it could have a lot of cost with it. More with the real world stuff, of course. But either way, everybody, first to last, are giving it everything they've got. And so I feel it's my duty to represent them in the positive light as I can. Even if they've just absolutely banzaied into the back of someone to take them out of the race. Okay, you have to say, well, that looked a bit reckless. But you don't just immediately call them out. There's occasions where I've gone, hang on, you've done this on purpose or something like that. But sometimes it appears blatant. I've made mistakes before. We've gone, oh, you've done this, you've cut the corner. Whereas actually, I've missed something that happened before that. They've actually been, they've been forced off the road and they had no choice and banzai over a chicane. You're talking about faux pas I've made. There was one recently in the real world where I was up at Anglesey, which is the very northwest tip of Wales. Beautiful place, and I'm very good at muddling up letters or names, like, instead of Dave Williams, I'll say Williams Dave or things like that. But instead of club chairman, I called him the Chub Clement.
Oh.
So as soon as I said it, I went, Chub Clement, what am I saying? Club chairman. So again, owning the mistake and making fun of it. He's just running with it. I find that it puts less pressure on me to be 100% perfect, because no commentator is. Every single commentator, high or low, will make these little faux pas. If you can have a bit of fun with it and make fun of yourself at the same time, when you're not taking yourself too seriously, which I think is very important, you have to do the best you can and take the role seriously. That doesn't mean you can't have fun with it. And exactly that, as you were saying earlier, that it's far more interesting to listen to someone that's delivering a commentary that's having fun with it than it is to listen to the "this has happened, this has happened, this has happened" style of commentary. If that's your style of doing it, okay, run with it. But in my experience, enjoyment and passion and enthusiasm is by far one of the most important qualities in a commentator.
Yeah. So let's talk about real world motorsport. And to start with, when you first started commentating sim racing, did you have it in your mind that this could be a route to commentating real world motorsport, or was it a case of, actually, I quite like the look of this, and this is what I'm here to do?
The latter. I actually wanted to be a Rocket League commentator when I very first started.
Oh,
because I was big on Rocket League at the time, and I did do some Rocket League commentary for Gfinity. Did get to talk about some of the best in Europe for some of the Gfinity series that was going on at the time, and I delivered that in very much like a football commentator would do it. So I sort of say as the ball went to a different player, I'd then say their name. So, down to here, down to here. And that's just the way that it happened. It wasn't a conscious decision. And I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to do this. It soon became obvious you have to be in America if you're going to make it big in the Rocket League broadcasting scene. And again, because of my children, I was like, not going to happen.
You can't be broadcasting at 3 a.m. Monday to Friday.
No, indeed. So, and I was then gaining traction, pun intended, with the F1 side of things. So I then followed that path. And how I ended up into the real world side of it was I started, when I realized that I was good at what I did, I thought, let's see how I can make that into a real world opportunity. So contacted local tracks, of which there's 2 near here, Castle Cream and Thruxton, which didn't get me anywhere. I thought, oh, well, never mind. And then at the end of 2019, I thought, right, I'm going to have a really big push at this. So I started emailing every club I could find an email address for, saying, hi, this is me, this is my show reel, this is what I can do. And then beginning part of 2020, well, we kind of know what happened there. I was like, well, I've picked the worst possible time.
The jump ship.
Yeah, I was like, well, that didn't go well. But as a result of that, it was June time, 2020, when I was contacted by a gentleman called Mark Werrell, who is a hugely successful and talented commentator, 20 plus years in the business, who organizes commentators for the Classic Sports Car Club. He's been involved with the CSCC since their inception, as far as commentary is concerned. So he's very much the voice of the club, and he allocates commentators to events across the country. So he sent me a clip of some racing at Donington, the Radical SR1s, and he said, commentate this. And the clip was only about 20 seconds. But that was, I thought, right, okay, let's do a bit of research first. So I had to look at what the round was, what the series was, what certain things was. Asked Mark, what does this mean? And things like that, so that I could enter that commentary as if I was familiar with the series.
So, sorry, just to interrupt here. So, because I want to break this down, because if one of the reasons that I was really excited to have you on is because we have so many people in the Good Finder community who are trying to become commentators and broadcasters, and so I know that they'll get a lot from this episode. And I think this is news to me, right? So this might not be news to a lot of people, but is that how you interview for a commentator's job in the real world? You get sent a silent clip and get told, right, commentate on this. That's almost like a live audition. Is that normal?
It was normal for this particular situation because I had no real life commentary basis to base my performance on. Yeah. I had my sim racing stuff, of course. I'd been in that for several years 4 years by then. And of course, as far as commentary is concerned, you're almost doing exactly the same thing. There's subtle differences. but you're generally doing exactly the same thing as you would in a sim racing scenario. So I still remember that really clearly. I was just getting into it, really into my stride. I was like, it was Donington Park, love Donington, and the clip suddenly ended, and I was mid-sentence, and I even said, "Oh, that rather caught me out." And the other thing that Mark asked me to do was give a filler, basically. So the race has been red flagged. Marshals are doing something. What would you say to keep the audience informed, that sort of thing? And I came up with it. I can't remember quite what I said. Now I think I talked about, if you want to get involved in this series, go here. I think I went down that kind of line. And Mark emailed me back and said, come and see me in Donington. But my journey into the commentary box was not quite that straightforward, unfortunately, because I did go and see him in Donington, and that was my first time ever to Donington Park, and I was barraging him with questions.
Yeah.
And he said to me sometime later, he said, it was great that you asked them, but it was very clear you were inexperienced in real world motorsport, and some of them you really should have known. But the fact that you asked meant you were interested in learning. So he would have much rather I did ask, but it was quite clear that I hadn't a clue what I was on about. But I knew I didn't know what I was on about, because all too many times he's had situations where people think they know what they're talking about. And because I've come from a customer service background, I know that feeling all too well, where someone's described a problem, you know what the issue is, but oh yes, I've done this, and you think that's got nothing to do with your issue, sir. But you can't say that. Oh yeah, how many people have been in the customer service or retail industry and just think, no, you're wrong. You'd love to say that, but you obviously can't. So Mark was more happy that I was actually saying, I don't know this, point me in the right direction. And as time went on, I would ask less and less questions because I then knew where to find my own answers. So my very first commentary was in before I talk about that, I had a rather unfortunate happening in 2020 where a very dear friend of mine, very dear school friend of mine, actually took his own life, which was a complete shock. And that happened in September 2020, just as I was potentially starting this journey. And something that you may have ascertained from my YouTube channel, what have you, that one thing I am a huge advocate of is mental health. I've suffered a number of mental health problems myself over the years, which might come as a bit of a surprise to some people because of being a commentator, being a more public figure.
You just assume extrovert. You assume
exactly.
Totally happy.
And God, there's a whole different show about how the difficulties I face and overcoming introversy to do what I do. But that's not for this particular show. But I had that weighing on my mind when I was trying to find a new path. And that led me down a very dark rabbit hole that I didn't know I was even going down. But my very first commentary was in Thruxton. It was due to be in Snetterton in 2021. But COVID, again, aggravated the racing calendar. And racing started the day after I was supposed to be in Snetterton. I was like, oh, really? Couldn't you have made it a week earlier? But ironically, because the calendar had changed, I ended up with going to two different places, Snetterton being one of them, in September, I think it was, in 2020. The other one, the first one, was March of 21, in Thruxton, which is one of my local circuits. And I loved it. I was wandering around the paddock, speaking to everybody. It was really, really friendly. And you'll appreciate this, Tom, but when you're in that kind of club racing surroundings, there's a lot of camaraderie. There's a lot of support available. And, of course, I didn't know who anybody was, and no one knew who I was. They would think, who the hell is this fat idiot wandering up to us having a chat? But as soon as I said I'm part of the commentary team, everybody was happy to have a chat to me, which was wonderful. I've had so many lovely, lovely chats. But things got very difficult for me in 21, where after my friend took his own life, it all came to a head when I basically had a breakdown in June, July time, and that following that made me realize quite how bad I'd got. Mental health, physical health wise, I was eating myself into a grave. I mean, I'm a very big guy because my vice is food. I don't smoke, I don't drink, so I go for food. So that made me sort of realize, no, I need to do something about this. And I then started to kind of get back on my feet a little bit. And then in October of last year, I had a stroke. I actually had a mini stroke. So I was hospitalized with that. And then 2 weeks later, I had COVID. So, wow. That was great.
That's as years go, that's a pretty tough obstacle course of major life events to overcome, especially when your role in motorsport is to be the, as you said, the extrovert, the happy, excited kind of, big energy figure that's telling the story of motorsport. When you've got quite a lot going on, that's a conflict, right?
Somewhat, yes. And there were times when it was really hard to kind of detach yourself from the real world. But I found that commentary was an escape. It was a way for me to just be someone else for a little while. Not that, and I don't mean that in the sense of I deliver my commentaries differently. It was more a case of I had something that could just separate me from the rubbish that was going on.
Yeah.
And allow me. Go on.
Sorry, I was say it's almost like an escape.
Yeah, exactly that. It's something for me to focus on that wasn't the stuff that I couldn't immediately resolve. Obviously I've had counselling and things like that to help me get back on my feet, and I'm in a much better place now. There are still dark days, yes, but I'm in a better place now as a result of the journey I've gone through. But commentary actually was a bit of a help because, like I say, it gave me an avenue to do what I love to do away from what was really impacting me at the time. So after having COVID, I've since then done a few other things for other than Classic Sports Car Club. I did a bit more presenting rather than commentary, which for me is dead easy. Which again might sound counterintuitive to some people. But you're on camera for 5 minutes. You then get to watch the race for a while, and then you're on camera again for another few minutes, and round you go. So if you're used to commentary, presenting is a doddle.
It's just a very short sidestep. So what were you presenting?
I did a bit of caterhams, a bit for it was the BRSCC, so British Racing and Sports Car Club, their Caterham Championship. I've done presenting for what are called the Legends series. They're hilarious fun. They're basically they're Ford, Dodge, and Chevy chassis, I think, from the 40s. With Yamaha motorcycle engines in them. They make a wonderful scream.
I've seen them at Knock Hill. They're intense.
Brilliant. They are huge, great grids as well, like 30 odd cars. And I've done presenting for them as well. And I'm going to be going to Donington actually in a couple of weeks' time, doing another round for them. So they're awesome. I love watching those. Also, Diesel Focuses, which is an odd series to think about. But again, single make series provide some brilliant racing, even if they're situations in the enduro car. I mean, how many great battles have you been involved with in the short time you've been doing enduro car? Single make series doesn't really matter how slow they are. I've always said I could commentate on milk flow racing, and you'd have great fun doing it. But
that sounds like something you could actually do on a Assetto Corsa too.
More than likely. But it comes back to the love of doing it. I love being involved in that industry, so it's easier for me to find the energy to do that sort of thing. It's very easier to do something well that you really enjoy doing.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so tell us about the how you kind of prepare differently or present differently if it's sim racing or motorsport. Is it largely the same? All the concepts are the same, or do you take a different approach? Presumably, so not to put words in your mouth, but actually in sim racing, maybe you actually have more data, bizarrely, than if you were at, say, up the tower in Donington or Cadwell Park.
It depends. As far as how you prepare it in a very similar way. You find out who and what and where. So you try and find out who you're talking about, which if you've been involved in a championship series, like what I do for PSGL, they're the same drivers week in, week out, broadly. So I know about them. I know, I've commentated them on several series, etc., etc. So I know who they are, where they are, know about the track that you're talking about, whether it's Snettington, Donington, Knockhill, Cadwell, whatever. Understand the intricacies of the track. So a track, and understand how the cars, so the what element, how that will attack a track that you're at. So take the Enduro car, for instance. That thing is going to be flat out almost everywhere. But you take something like that to Cadwell Park, the car's going to work very differently than it will.
You're telling me.
So between Cadwell and Donington, you attack those very, very differently. So it's understanding how those cars react differently. But relate that more to like Classic Sports Car Club, where you have a different mixture of cars. You've got, in some series, you'll have like BMW, Lotus, TVR, very different cars. You could easily have a 4.7 litre growler being chased by a 1.8 litre screamer of some description. It's understanding how the different machinery can behave on a track. And that's the same sim racing as it is to the real world. If it's a single spec series, like, obviously the Formula One stuff, they're all the same. So you have less of that to worry about. But it's like I say, it's understanding the who, the what, the where, and almost the why. But it's the what. What is racing, where it's racing, and who is racing it. You approach those the same way, real life and sim racing. The differences more come in how you deliver it. So in sim racing, you either have direct control of the cameras, like when I do my F1 stuff. If I'm the streamer, I have direct control of the cameras. If I'm doing something for Gridfinder, for instance, that tends to be handled by the god himself, Mike Yao. So I'm relying upon a provided image, which is exactly the same as a commentary box. But the difference there is that in a commentary box, you have typically a lot of places you need to look, not just at the stream you're given. You can do it like that, but you've generally got a lot of monitors, timing screens, other cameras around the. Depends on the commentary box, but you got other cameras. You've got the actual windows in the commentary box to look out of as well. So you've got a lot more places you need to look. In sim racing, you're looking in one place.
Yeah,
you can look out the window if you like, but you ain't going to get a lot out of there. But it's one of those things that you have to be. You have got to be a bit more on the ball to use all of the tools available to you, because they're delivered to you in a bit of a different way in the real world as they are in sim racing.
Yeah,
there's still lots of places you can look. You can look at at timings, at championship results, obviously the race itself, other cameras if you can. So there's still plenty of places you can look in sim racing, but unless you have 40 different screens around you, generally you're looking here and you're looking here.
Yeah.
Whereas in a real world box, you're looking everywhere.
So spinning around.
Yeah, it's similar challenge, just delivered in a different way.
Talking of sim racing, shall we do some?
Oh yes.
Okay, so I need to move across to my rig. Whilst I'm doing so, if you let everyone know the track you've chosen, the sim we're in, and then the cars you've chosen, because you've chosen a great selection of cars. I've chosen a GT40. Spoiler, there is a GT40 on the track. But yeah, go through the cars you've chosen. Are there any stories behind them, or are we just like, these are kind of cool cars?
No, there is no story, I'm afraid. It's just a case of I like them. So the track itself is Bannock Brae, which it was my very favourite track from Project Cars 1. That was ported over to Project Cars 2 and then converted into Assetto Corsa that we'll be having on track day in. And the cars I've chosen are just cars that I really love the look of or the sound of. So we've got the Audi Sport Quattro S1E2, we've got the BMW M3 E92, we've got the Ferrari 250 GTO, the 458 Italia, and the F40. Lovely car. We do indeed have the Ford GT40, which has been that's probably the only one with a story, in the sense of it has been one of my favourite cars since I was this big. We have a Lamborghini Countach and we have a Lamborghini Gallardo SL. Just wonderful cars that really have just amazing. Well, just great cars. It's nothing one that I am realizing I don't. We're running out of light in here, so I need to turn my lights on.
Well, I've just jumped in the GT40. So I'm gonna just kind of start getting around Bannock Bray a little bit. Are you in the server yet, Chris?
I should be joining momentarily. You'll have to forgive me because AC is not a sim I'm used to, so I need to get more used to it. But here we go. I'm hopping now.
I struggled a little bit with the GT40 during practice, but it's a fun car. It reminds me a little bit of the Lotuses that we drove last week with GP laps. They like to lunge from one side to the other, and you have to brake so early, and they're not particularly stable on the brakes, but they are incredibly rewarding to drive.
Yeah, I've got a GT40 as well. It's the noise. That's what I love so much about this car.
It does sound incredible. And actually, the noise paired with this track this is quite a special experience in sim racing, I think. And this is kind of what I love about sim racing is the mods, the combinations that you can come up with.
Yeah.
That you can't come up with elsewhere. Just because of the modding community, right?
Yeah, 100%. Now, up until literally yesterday, I would have been doing this in VR, but unfortunately my VR headset decided this weekend was a great idea to die, which was a great shame. I love racing in VR.
How much racing do you do then? How much racing do you do yourself? Do you competitively race or do you go for drive?
No, I tend to just time trial, really. I've been one of I'm a very odd person. Well, I'm an odd person anyway, but I'm an odd person when it comes to sim racing. And like I said, I tend to do time trialing, but I will time trial one track with every car I can throw at it.
Right, okay. So you become a bit of a track expert.
Expert is a bit of a tall phrase.
Still relative, isn't it?
Yeah. But Bannock Bray was a track that I did to death, so that's part of the reason why I chose it.
Yeah, I drove Bannock Bray in the Sim Sport Racing series where we drove the Clios around all the British tracks, and Bannock Bray was one of the rounds, and it was a bit of a wild card, bit of a joker. It's it's a tough track, but once you nail it, it's so satisfying. I'm going to wait for you at the corner into the cut through the village, because going between the two houses in the any kind of speed is it's quite an experience.
It's clinch.
Yeah, it's a little bit. I was enjoying it in the Clios. Trying to go side by side through there was always a little bit emotional.
Yeah. Oh, whoops. Lap will not count. I'm not really worried about that right now. Sorry, I should be finding you shortly. Oh, yeah, I see you.
Just between the buildings. There we go. I tell you what, this car looks just as good from the front as it does at the back.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely does.
So how much practice did you put in on this combination?
1 lap.
Nice. I feel like with this car, the trick is just to brake early.
Yeah, when you drop the gear braking, the tail gets lively.
Yeah, you have to blip the throttle on the downshifts, I've found.
Yeah. I remember racing Clios here, and that in Project Cars 2, that was awesome fun.
Yeah, the Clios are far more stable than this. There's a lot more flat-out sections in the Clio than there are on the GT40. I just love with the GT40, you go around a corner, you put your foot down a little bit too early, the back end starts to come out, but you can catch it.
I haven't learned the catching it yet. The catching it is the wall so far. This was a track actually that I did. It was my first YouTube series. Was here. I called it the Bluster Bay Challenge, and this was in Project. It was in Project Cars 1, and now this was in the days when I had a steering wheel that could only do 180 degrees lock to lock, so 90 left, 90 right.
Right. Okay.
It was horrible. I can't remember what the wheel was called, but it actually had rubber sticky pads that you would attach it to your desk with. You wouldn't actually be able to clamp it. There were no clamps on it.
Right. Okay. So you can just imagine what the force feedback the sticklers for force feedback. I bet there's not even a Newton meter in that.
Nope. It had force to center, which was basically just what felt like a stone on the end of a spring.
Yeah.
That's all it had. So, and I would have the weather set to rain because it's based in Scotland. Of course, it's going to be raining.
Yeah,
so I did.
This is, in the name of sim racing, this isn't that realistic, is it? A nice sunny day in Scotland.
Yeah. I'll wait for you to recover for that one. So I drove every car. I would do like 2 cars an episode, and I slowly got. And this was in the days when the AI was at 40%, and I needed the racing line on because I couldn't drive any other way. And that wheel died mid-series, so I then got the Logitech Driving Force GT,
Nice.
which I still use, but not that same one. I got a replacement, which is also dying. You know, the shift up paddle has died, so I have to use a different button to shift up with. But yeah, so I don't have the greatest equipment in the world because I don't have the time to plow into endless amounts of driving and tuning setups. Every bit of sim racing I've done has been on default setups or pinch setups from somewhere.
I'm exactly the same.
Yeah, I've just never had the time or really understanding to fine tune a setup.
Yeah, I've been very lucky. So we have Gridfinder has a sim racing team, and the team captain, a guy called Tristan Bullwinkle, is an incredible setup engineer, and he makes setups for the team. The team's doing incredibly well, but every now and then, if we race together, he'll make a setup for me, and I'm like, this is what this car should feel like. Interesting.
Yeah, so when that series was finished, when I got to the final car in Project Cars 1, I then decided to do the Panorama Pandemonium Challenge. I'll give you one guess on what track that was.
Couldn't guess.
That would be Bathurst.
Oh, saved it.
That would be Mount Panorama itself. That I then did the same thing, but I then on that one I did dry weather, but all every car was done from in car. The view was in car rather than, which is what I normally do. It's what I'm doing now, which is bonnet camera. And I would even do VR in bonnet camera, which offends the VR purists.
I could just imagine the forums lighting up. What was the motivation then behind that first YouTube series?
I just wanted to try it, see what it was like. And whilst I really enjoyed doing it, I then realised just how much time you need to dedicate to doing things like that. And this was before commentary had really taken off. So I had a bit more time, but even still, it just completely changed how much time I had to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's not a quick process. Video editing can be painful, especially when you first start it. We did a video for our when we rolled the enduro car. Oh, followed you in deep there. Yeah, we at Snetterton during practice we managed to flip our enduro car. So one of the videos on our YouTube channel is the car flipping from the onboard. But then we did a bit of an interview about it. So we kind of went through the different people in the team, so including Toby, who was in the car at the time when the car rolled, and we kind of went through the process of what it was like when it happened, like how quickly the stewards got to hear, what the stewards said to him when they kind of approached the car, what the process was for getting him out of the car, and then we went to the medical center and spoke with people at we spoke about what it's like being in a medical center at a track, what to expect, etc. Oh, hello. Spoke to like some members of the team. So spoke to Jem. Ooh.
Nope.
Saved it.
Or the wall saved it for me.
And I made a bit of a video about what it's like crashing at club racing, and it was good. But the point here is it took me forever. I thought, I'll knock that up. I'll knock this video up whilst we're at the track. And it took me about 4 hours sat in the Graves trailer trying to put all these clips together and the audio and bits and pieces. So I can imagine trying to start a YouTube channel and trying to work out your branding and your overlays and all the rest of it. And also make sure that you're actually having fun whilst you do it. Otherwise, it's basically no point.
Yeah.
It's quite a challenge.
Yeah, I also tried to do like a few Let's Plays as well of non-racing video games. So like Dungeon Siege, for instance, was a huge game I loved back in the day. So I did a playthrough of that whilst trying to learn to commentate and family life and work. So that took a while.
So it's earlier you kind of said that you consider yourself an introvert, but a lot of your hobbies do revolve around kind of putting yourself out there in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not so introverted as I used to be, because I've learnt, as I've learnt to deal with my own kind of issues, as I was saying earlier, and also family life. Oh, nice move.
Not so nice. I thought I was going to give that a go. I thought that was going to look great.
You just kind of have to learn to deal with it, I guess. But because I found that I really enjoyed this kind of medium, this method of expression, to share my love of motorsport and video games, but using my own vocal presentation in a way that I'd done for many years in the customer service industry, and hated working in the customer service industry, but it helped develop that kind of skill. So combining what I was good at with something I really enjoyed doing then gave me the kind of tools to learn how to better express myself, or to how to, like I said earlier, kind of use sim racing commentary as a means to separate myself from the kind of the difficulties of life.
Yeah, it was kind of nice to see during COVID, obviously, with a lot of people struggling, kind of being stuck indoors and with the kind of anxiety around everything that was happening with COVID. I did notice that the sim racing community was really coming together. There was lots of kind of community events to kind of target that issue that everyone was facing.
Yeah, I was very lucky that I was still able to work. My office, the place I was working at the time, we were able to stay socially distanced. Those that could work from home did. I couldn't because of the specialist equipment I was working with. But I was still able to. So I was actually able to. I was able to stick this GT40 into the wall. I was able to leave the house. But yeah, my wife wasn't. So she was at home with our two children for 6 months, and yeah, that was very, very telling. As soon as I would get home from work, she would just say, "They're yours," and and just separate herself as best she could at the time. But yeah, so obviously, the lockdown period was very, very difficult, but it actually gave sim racing an opportunity to show its worth.
Yeah, 100%. And talking about sim racing, tell us about your time with PSGL and WOR, because you've commentated with, if I'm right, AOR, PSGL, and WOR, right?
A few other places as well, but yes, in F1 terms, those have been my mainstays. AOR first, that was where I was very first introduced to the world. WOR I've only done as a stand-in for their lead commentators. PSGL came about when I came back to sim racing after I'd realised how difficult it was to get real-world racing commitments. I thought, well, I'll come back to doing sim racing because you always have the bug for it. And nearly introduced myself to your car there. So PSGL gave me a home, essentially, same as AOR did very first time round. This car is difficult.
I just planted my foot there to get a good exit.
So PSGL gave me a home, and it was made very clear that I said I would work my way up because I couldn't just rely on I am me, do you know who I am kind of routine that I said earlier.
Yeah.
But it was becoming obvious. Like I say, it was I was then realizing that I had to rebuild my reputation, because essentially a lot of people didn't really remember. There were a number of people that did remember who I was, but there were a lot more people that didn't. So I'd have to rebuild my reputation as an F1 league racing commentator again. So I've had the opportunity to do top level for PSGL, but again only as a stand-in, because they've already got their commentators established. So that makes perfect sense.
PSG and WO are both at the top of their game, right? So you get the esports drivers, and you get like 1,000 people watching. How did that feel the first time you had like over 1,000 people watching a stream?
To be honest, I didn't pay. Oh God! Ignore me a minute. Nothing to see here. I didn't pay attention to the numbers. Hang on, I'm on push to talk because my microphone's not on a boom. It's right next to me here, so I have to go push to talk to reduce the amount of steering wheel rumble you hear.
It just adds to the experience.
I didn't pay attention to the numbers whatsoever, because I didn't want to put more pressure on myself to go straight back up to top level commentary, because PSGL of course has a reputation. It is one of the biggest leagues out there, and the crowd won't care that you're a returning commentator. They won't care if you're less experienced. They expect you to do well straight out of the box. So I didn't want to put pressure on myself to do well immediately after having had a break for a few months. So I didn't look at the numbers. I did what I was there to do, and that's how I approach a lot of sim racing commentaries. I'm there to represent the people I'm commentating for. I'm not commentating for me. It's not the Chris Buxton League. It's PSGL. So I'm there to represent them, and I'm going to hit the wall here. Ow! Yeah. Oh, hi there.
No nudge.
I'm there to represent PSGL. I'm there to represent Gridfinder. I'm there to represent whoever it is. So, of course, I want to do well, but there's an expectation that the name carries. So I didn't want to overpressure myself to live up immediately up to that expectation. So whether I'm commentating for 1 or 1,000, I try my best to deliver the same. I don't adjust how I deliver anything by how many people are potentially watching.
That comes back to that thing we were talking about earlier about personal brand, right? So if you kind of think, oh well, this isn't worth putting any effort into, I'm getting paid, but there's only 10 people watching, and then somebody from, I don't know, a huge league or F1 esports themselves or whatever are looking for a new commentator, and they're going through various different streams, and they come across one where, okay, only 10 people were watching, but it was you, and they just want to see what you were like, and you're just a bit lackluster, then it comes back to you, right? And it kind of affects your personal brand. Yeah,
absolutely. If you're seen to... If you're judged by a stream that you really couldn't be bothered with, that'll haunt you. I mean, how many times have we seen, like a normal tweet, for instance, given in the heat of the moment, return and bite someone on the backside? It's exactly the same thing. If you represent yourself or whoever, the league you're commentating for or whatever it is, in a bad way, that will find a way of biting you on the backside. So, but I've never been one to I'll only commentate if there's 1,000 people there. Rubbish.
Yeah.
Whether there's 1 or a million, I find no reason to adjust how I'm doing something just by who happens to be watching that day. If there's more people there, great. It can be demoralizing if you just live on the numbers. So I tend to ignore the numbers entirely. It's what the expectation of the league or whoever you're commentating for is. If they're used to having 10 and they get 11, brilliant. If they're used to getting 10,000 and they have 9,000, then it's, the expectation hasn't been met. But that isn't necessarily your fault. That's there's a lot of things outside of your control in that respect. Also, commentary can be a very, very thankless task because inevitably no one tunes in for the commentator. There are people that follow commentators, yes, but by and large they follow drivers. So it can feel a very thankless task.
Yeah, like recently retired, not retired, but retired from sim racing, from PSGL, George Morgan. he had a great personal brand. People were tuning in, and you know, his followers on his Twitter, you did get the impression that people were really listening, not exclusively, but people really were looking forward to the race because they knew that George would be commentating.
Absolutely.
That's quite difficult to achieve, because even in, you know, Formula One, I don't think anybody is really tuning in for, you know, right, don't get me wrong, Martin Brundle, Crofty, I'm a big fan. I know they're not everyone's cup of tea, but I think they're fantastic.
So,
and people, but even then, I'm not really tuning in for them. You know, I don't follow them on Twitter or anything like that. I'm not kind of, you know, upset if it's somebody else standing in, or, you know, Jenson Button comes and does a round. I'm like perfectly happy. Whereas with George, he seemed to achieve this level of personal brand in commentary, which has obviously now led to much bigger things, right?
Yeah, George is brilliant at engaging the public, and he's a phenomenal commentator. He very much is the standard. I was once considered the standard when I was head commentator at AOR, and that put more pressure on me to perform. As much as I enjoyed people enjoying what I do, it wasn't a case of, you know, there's no ego stroking as far as I'm concerned. And I think George was the same. He was very much in it for the love of doing it, and because his method of delivery is phenomenal. Well, I say was phenomenal, is phenomenal. That's a very difficult set of shoes to fill for anybody that's it's Dan Field that is going to replace him at PSGL F1, and Dan is again a phenomenal commentator, but his style is different. I won't say better or worse. That's down to your own personal opinion, but George was phenomenal. He actually, just as I was about to leave AOR, he actually approached me as well, did George. And I remember saying to him, you know, you're absolutely phenomenal. You will go a long way. And, look at it now.
You weren't wrong.
It happens sometimes.
I wonder if sim racing commentary might start to become the standard route in to motorsport commentary. Because if you think about it, you're going to get a much better... Are you going in for fuel?
Yes.
Yeah, same. You're going to get a much better show reel. You could do a lot more.
Yeah.
You know, you can commentate on Formula One, classic cars, you know, whatever you want, really. A lot easier than if you wanted to do that for, you know, if you decided that you're going to do that for real. Like, it's going to be very difficult to get an opportunity to go and commentate on Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3, or classic cars without any kind of motorsport commentary experience.
I don't know if it'll become the standard way, but it will become a recognised way, a legitimate way of proving yourself. The same for drivers. You know, there's more and more now that sim racing drivers are finding their way into real life racing. So, I mean, Jem Bulabasi is in FIA Formula 2 as a prime example of that. Brendan Lee has done Formula 4. Jem has also done GT racing, I think, Porsche racing, if I remember. So I fully see that sim racing will be a recognised route. Whether it will become the standard route, I'm not so sure about that. But like you say, for broadcasters, not just for drivers, it'll be seen as a very valid and recognisable route rather than a standard route per se.
It's effective.
I'm enjoying the sound of this car so much, I'm kind of forgetting to drive it.
I am too. Oh!
Yeah.
I didn't see you there. Sorry.
I found the wall rather than you, I think.
I tell you what, I've completely lost track of time. I've got no idea how much time we've got left.
No, I don't know how long we've been running for either.
Yeah, Mike, you have to let me know in my ear when we get to about 15:15.
That was 5 minutes ago.
Ah, okay. Right. So, last lap, race you to the pits.
All right.
Oh, it's going to get serious now. Oh, the competitiveness. You and I have not got this corner right once. Right. This is where I've caught you the last couple of laps. Is it going to happen again?
Whoa!
Oh, I'm just following you into the barriers. This car is so much fun.
It is.
It's one of those cars where if somebody invited me to a league race in a GT40, I would be absolutely terrified because I would not want the responsibility of crashing into somebody at a race start or, in the last lap or whatever, because it's so difficult to control. But for the sake of just driving around a track, especially this track, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
And you're right, it does sound epic.
Certainly does.
I did see that we had a few questions in the chat, so
okay.
I'm going to pull over. I'm going to go to the pits. And have a look.
Something I always used to say in my YouTube videos as well is, do not use this as a way to learn how to drive. And I think I've reproven that fact tonight.
That was a lot of fun. Yeah. I think there's going to be some pretty awesome screen captures there of those two beautiful cars going. All right, so we've got some questions. Oh, we've had Lawrence de Souza in the chat as well. What's the crack, boys? I really enjoyed our episode with him. So, question for Chris from Toby. So, Toby Owen Racing, actually, who we were talking about earlier, about his upside down escapades. If you could see any fictional track brought to life in the real world, what would it be?
The one and only Bannock Break would be lovely, but it would never be, it would never be sanctioned, essentially. I don't know, because my sim racing experience has been primarily on tracks that we've seen before. So the only one that I have any kind of authority on will be Bannock Break. Maybe not as maybe do this as like a rallying special stage, or effectively like a hill climb, rather than a GT race. That would be brilliant, I think, on Bannock Break.
Yeah, that would be fun. I mean, Bannock Bray is a bit of a classic, isn't it? It's just so well done. It gets the balance right between like the Sunday drive and then the raceability. But you're right, a hill sprint would be fun. Right. So Andrew Clues asks, what sort of info does Chris have in his research? Is it stats, stories, or details of their past career? I assume drivers' past careers. Unless it's yours, maybe it's your past career.
Well, I think I'm a subject matter expert on my own career. In sim racing wise, I've seen both. It's kind of a mixture of the three. The place I would tend to start is race results, how a driver did on a track in the past. But that never really tells a whole story. You could see that someone DNF'd in a particular race, but it doesn't tell you why. Maybe they made a mistake. Maybe their car let them down. Perhaps somebody else took, their own somebody else's incident took them out. You can't rely on just results. Having them is useful. You can say, oh, okay, this driver struggled here last time, or this track was unkind to them, something like that. Finding out something about them, a story or a fact, is really, really good to have. In wandering around the paddock and speaking to drivers, I love doing that. It's so much fun to get to know them on a more personal level. So, like, this driver is a retired airline pilot, or this driver's a doctor, or things like that. It's just nice little way that brings you as the commentator into a more kind of relatable role. You're not just a newsreader. You're not just saying what is going on.
Well, it's a valid part of the story, isn't it? And it's kind of unique to club racing and sim racing. If you were commentating on a Formula One race, you wouldn't expect Martin Brundle to go down through the garages and be like to Alex Albon, so what do you do Monday to Friday then? Or is this your full-time gig? He's not going to be working in Costco. So yeah, it was kind of nice being able to bring that color to the commentary. I fondly remember Alex Weller coming down the garages at Snetterton, asking us about our story, how we came to be the team we were, what we thought, how we thought we were going to be doing that weekend. And it just added so much more to the commentary when he then goes back up to the box and as he's talking about the cars, he kind of can put a face to a livery.
And also, the way to approach that is tell the story you want to hear. What are you interested in? Find the detail you want to know and add something maybe it's a little bit more obscure to it. So find out those previous race results, but find out something, this car was bought from that person, or this previous car is now sold to Goodwood as a race meeting car, or something like that. So find out what you want to know and add a quirk or something like that in the real racing world. In the sim racing world, it's you've got more avenues instantly. You've got Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You've got other means to find bits out that you wouldn't necessarily have in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Andrew also asked, how long does it take you to prep?
Oh, it kind of depends how much prep you want to do. That sounds like a bit of an odd question, but you can go into a meeting completely blind. I would never recommend it because it will make your job much harder if you've got no other information to talk about. I can spend a week prepping for a race meeting of a weekend, but that doesn't mean like 9 to 5 I'm doing all the hours. It's around what I'm doing. So, but for Classic Sports Car Club, I actually have my own database of previous race results that I add my own little notes that I've gathered in my time with them, which has only been about 18 months. But I very much hope to be working with them long term. So having that information, even if I never use it, I'd rather have it. And I'd rather have it and not need it than the other way around. So the more time, the better, generally speaking, but you can get to a point where you're gathering kind of nonsensical things for the sake of gathering something. So you're working smarter is more important than working harder.
Yeah, like in anything, right? All right, Chris, thank you so much for your time today. This has been really fun. I really appreciate your choice of car and track. I actually didn't think I would when you said it. I was like, oh god, Bannock Bray, another one. Why? Nobody will just pick, I don't know, the Nürburgring. Like no one picks one that we know. It's always something a little bit left field. And actually, I'm really glad that was the case because that was fun. And I think the GT40 around Bannock Bray might be my new. I'm just going to go and chill out and do some sim racing combo. It used to be the Nordschleifer any GT3. Now I think I might try some of the old classic cars. I kind of started airing that way after the GP Laps episode last week. But thank you for your time and thank you for sharing what you shared with us about your mental health. Obviously, it's not an easy thing to talk about, but I know that lots of people were affected by COVID. And a lot of people will have got into sim racing during that time, and so we'll probably relate sim racing with those times in their lives. So I'm really hoping this episode is useful for upcoming commentators and sim racers who want to get into the world of broadcasting, be it esports broadcasting, sim racing broadcasting, or real world motorsport. So thank you for all the insights that you've given.
My pleasure, and thank you so much for inviting me on. It has been a ball. I have loved it. And if anybody wants to find me, have any questions or ask any guidance, please do. I'm all for sharing knowledge, and certainly with the mental health is something that's very dear to my heart. It's something I've always wanted to kind of promote a positive image about. It's particularly difficult for a lot of men to seek advice in that sort of thing. So it's talking about it is a very difficult first step. So come and find me. Come and have a chat.
Where can people find you, Chris?
Easiest place to find me would be on Twitter at KingKodiak_UK. I've been King Kodiak for a very long time now.
That was one of my questions I forgot to ask. What's the story? Right, we're short for time, so in 30 seconds, what is the story behind King Kodiak?
My original online name was Munchie19 because I was 19 years old when I first got online. and no one took me seriously. Funny that.
Shocker.
So after browsing through a thesaurus, I found Kodiak, which is actually a bear. It's a very big brown bear based on Kodiak Island, which is off the coast of Alaska. But a lot of people had Kodiak back then because it was a mech in MechWarrior 2, I believe. So a friend of mine thought of King Kodiak, and it's stuck ever since. And it's been there since about 2001.
Nice. Well, that is far more creative than mine, which is just my initials and my name. Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time, Chris. I really appreciate it. And if you want to listen to this, to any of our podcasts, you can go to Spotify, Apple, or Google Podcasts, and you can find little snippets of the podcast on our Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, all at Gridfinder. And thank you to Trak Racer that sponsored the podcast and provided us the sim rig that I was racing in tonight, even with the force feedback, the direct drive force feedback I had going around the Bannock Pro GT40. That thing is rigid. So thank you very much, Matt, and thank you for the episode you gave us a few months ago. That is everything. I think I've ticked everything off of my list. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Chris. Really appreciate it, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you very much. Look forward to it.